Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Kicking off the unofficial beginning of summer as we remember those who fought for our freedom in this country. Thanks to the servicemen and women who've done so, and thank you for being a part of this latest podcast, what's all that's happening in sports, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as last Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. So now that we got that out of the way, and of course, remembering those who had fallen on this day as the unofficial beginning of summer is here, feels a little bit better in the Northeast, as I talked about on Thursday. A lot of rain, a lot of cool weather, although it had improved over the weekend, and today is the best day yet. But, of course, I'm indoors recording this, and why not? Just because it's a holiday doesn't mean it's a holiday for yours truly with all that's going on in sports. And I'm going to start off with the conference finals, obviously NBA, NHL. The NHL right now is looking like it's almost a formality that we're going to have a Stanley Cup rematch. And for those out there that were hoping maybe Dallas, as I picked them back in October prior to the start of the season, or maybe Carolina will figure a way to at least be competitive in this series, and they've been anything but. We'll touch on that a little bit later. I'm going to get to the NBA, but a quick housekeeping note that I just thought of. Actually, I'm dog sitting at the moment, and thanks to my lovely wife who's taking care of Blue, a Yorkie who's a yapper, I must say. So hopefully she will not interrupt my stream of consciousness, and if I do, there'll probably be a couple of edits along the way, so my apologies beforehand if things seem to be just a little bit off the rails, or just the standpoint of me not getting my complete focus back. I'm obviously zeroed in and locked in on this particular podcast because there's a lot that I want to say, but I just thought I'd throw that out there from the start, just in case if you're wondering, oh wait, JAYREELZ was talking about this and now all of a sudden he jumped to that. And that's only because if anybody knocks on the door or if there's anybody in the hallway, the elevator, the dog just goes crazy. So there isn't anything I can do to control that, although we're doing our best to do that. But I just thought I'd throw that out there right from jump. So my apologies if that does happen to occur throughout the course of this recording. Now, as far as the NBA, there's intrigue there. Now, I understand that both of these series, although now we can look at it and say, all right, let's see what's going to happen now in a game 4 tonight, whether it be in Minnesota or even a game 4 tomorrow night in Indiana. And that's where I'm going to begin, because when you think about what the Knicks had done a week ago this past Friday, where 7th Avenue, right outside of Madison Square Garden, you would have thought the Knicks won a championship. As I talked about last Monday, if you recall, for those who do watch or listen. And if you didn't, shame on you. Or you can always go back and check it out if you like. But for the Knicks fan that was giddy, and that's even the old Knicks fans, where their name is Spike Lee, even Stephen A. Smith, maybe even to a certain extent Ben Stiller, Jon Stewart, where they thought they had received a trophy just for making an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. And as it was certainly rude to them in their home building, considering what we talked about on Thursday with the debacle there on Wednesday night, the collapse there by the Knicks, and of course the epic comeback by Indiana. And then on Friday night, behind Pascal Siakam's 39 points, and with the game tooth and nail, you had to wonder what Tom Thibodeau was thinking. And I really haven't heard an explanation of why Karl-Anthony Towns sat out for over 6 minutes during the fourth quarter, where I believe he sat with around 8-something to go, and he came back in the game with 2 minutes left, where he had Mitchell Robinson pretty much hung out to dry. And I understand he needed defense. He needed a guy that had some length and some rim protection, but we know that he adds nothing offensively. And of course, they want to do the hack-a-mitch, where they want to put him to the free throw line, and we know how that, for the most part, that turns out to be a disaster. But you had that go on to where the Knicks were down 0-2 going to Indiana, and we had seen this movie before in the previous round. And although it did not result in a blowout the way the Cavaliers did so in Game 3 of the conference semifinals, but there was a part of me in the back of my mind that thought, well, if the Knicks are going to get off the deck, obviously they had to do it last night, number one. And number two, if this is any way to try to slow down this Pacer train, would not only be last night, but to the standpoint to where the Pacers came out flying, just like you saw in the Indianapolis 500 earlier yesterday afternoon, and they built a 20-point lead, and they were flying in Indianapolis thinking that it was going to be a situation where the Pacers were just going to advance to an NBA final with a sweep. But in the second half, when they were down by 16, I remember at one point, was it 78-53? That's 15 if you do the math. And then 10 points going into the fourth quarter, and with Jalen Brunson in foul trouble, and you thought to yourself, oh, geez, this was like the Celtic Game 5 scenario where Jalen Brunson fouled out, and they had to have him sit out, and it was smart for Tom Thibodeau to do that because you didn't want to have him foul out and almost feel like you have to give up the game at that point. But with Brunson out and not shooting well, he was 5 for 15 when he sat on the bench there with those 5 fouls. But then all of a sudden, the guy who had to come to the forefront, the guy who absolutely positively had to step up with his all-star resume and with the guy that certainly could put the fingerprints on a game but has floated in and out of these games throughout the course of the playoffs. But for Karl-Anthony Towns to put up 20 points in the fourth quarter and pretty much just dominate to the point where the Knicks came all the way back, took the lead, and then hung on late for a 106-100 victory. Brunson did come back in, made a couple of big shots, didn't foul out of the game, and the Pacer offense just sputtered. As Tyrese Halliburton mentioned in the postgame, he said, for whatever the reason, yes, we got off to that great start, but we just weren't ourselves out there, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. And for the Pacers, who I'm sure they smelled it, they knew that they had blood in the water with the Knicks there, and if they were able to polish them off, this series would have been over. And now you gave them life and you gave them an oxygen tank for them to not only live to see the tomorrow, which they would have done, obviously, if they would have lost the game, but now that they've won and they have a little bit of confidence, and now that they get a bit of a reset after 48 hours, would you be surprised if this series goes back to Madison Square Garden tied at 2? I wouldn't. And that's what the Pacers have to be kicking themselves. And I believe that's even also what Tyrese Halliburton said. Yeah, we're kicking ourselves, or watched a bit of the film prior to him going into the post-game presser, and I'm sure he's probably looking at film as I'm speaking at this very moment. And the Pacers, although they've been very good throughout this whole postseason, and we know what they've done here over the first 2.5 rounds, but that was a game that they had in their fingertips and they let it slip away. And it happens. We've seen that happen to the Knicks. We've seen that happen to the Celtics. We've seen that to the Cavs in Game 2 against Indiana, the Milwaukee series. I mean, there's a bunch of different examples that we could see here. But now if you're a Knicks fan, I'm sure you are pumped up a little bit. Maybe your chest is not puffed out completely because you know you have to get another game in Indiana. Now, would it be impossible if they're down 3-1 that they would not be able to come back from that deficit to win the series? It's not impossible. We've seen stranger things happen because, remember, they do have 2 games in their building if it happens to fall that way. Now, mind you, they do have to win a game number 6 in Indiana. If it is a 3-1 series deficit, of course, they take care of home court on, what would it be, on Thursday night, and then on top of that would have to go back to Indiana on Saturday to win that game. But they know 1 game at a time, but 2 of those final 3 games, if they do happen to lose tomorrow night, would be in their building. So if there's any consolation, they do have that. But of course, I'm sure the Knicks are not even thinking that right now. They just want to get out of Dodge with a win there tomorrow night. And I'm not just going to base it on momentum. I could see tomorrow's game being tooth and nail. I could see it being a situation where it could come down to those last couple of minutes. But would I also think that with the Pacers in the previous series, would they come out like gangbusters and then put the proverbial foot on the Knicks' necks? I can see that as well. But how I think this game is going to shape up tomorrow, to me, this is more about the Pacers now, because the Knicks, we know what they're made of. Now, granted, they had that huge hiccup there in Game 1 there the other night. But now that they've gotten their equilibrium back a little bit and with some confidence in their tank, I would think that they're going to come out and have a big game and to be there in the fourth quarter within a score or 2. The Pacers, we know what they're capable of too, but now I want to see, as weird as this may be, considering that they're up 2-1 in this series and they pretty much led from in front throughout this whole postseason. And now there's a little bit of pressure on them. Not a ton, because if they lose the game, they know they could go back to Madison Square Garden and win a game there, as we've seen already in those first 2 games. But now the pressure's on the Pacers to win this game. Because if they let this one slip, and knowing that it'll be a best of 3 with the home court advantage stolen from Indiana the way they did to the Knicks, that is a terrible job. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you cut it. So that's why this series has become a little bit intriguing here from that standpoint, and it's all predicated on what happens tomorrow. We know that. But because the Knicks were able to gut one out, as we've seen them do time after time throughout this whole playoff run, and now they have one more game where they have to do so in order to get even. So I think the Knicks, Now, I picked Pacers in 6, so you know what? I want to have a thrilling series. I want it to be nail-biter time for those in Indiana and here in New York, and everybody knows I'm not a Knicks fan, but I would like to see the Knicks win, although I'm not going to root for them to win, but just to see them win, to see what the stage will be like come Thursday night at the Garden, knowing that that's going to be pretty much the game that could win the series. So that's what I'm hoping for there, and I think that's what's going to happen. Would I be shocked if the Pacers run them out of the gym? I can't say I would, based on their track record of the previous round and what they did to Cleveland after they got run out of the gym in Game 3. So that's what you have with that series there, and I think Brunson, I'm sure he's going to try to stay away from foul trouble, as he's a guy that obviously needs to be on the court. And even though the Knicks seem tired and run ragged or what have you, but you know what? It's late in this postseason. It's now getting deeper into this conference final. And you know what? You got to have your guys out there. And I'm sure to a man, the last thing they want to do is sit there and get rest, where they know that their season is literally on the line here, considering that they do not want to fall behind 3-1. So that's what you have in that series. And then in the Western Conference between OKC and Minnesota, now the games in OKC were a non-watch. We saw what happened there on Thursday night, where the Thunder were just rolling again, and there were no answers, although Anthony Edwards had a better game on Thursday as opposed to Tuesday night. But then the Thunder took care of business. Of course, we talked about SGA being the MVP of the league, and then they had a 2-0 series lead. And then what happened there on Saturday night, I get it, that Minnesota in their building, friendly confines, everything was going to be all peaches and cream, but it was peaches, strawberries, and any other fruit, and cream and honey, or who knows, because that was a route that the OKC fans, I'm sure, were actually stunned by, considering that SGA only had 14 points, and mind you, they pretty much punted the second half away. But for the T-Wolves, where Julius Randle bounced back from a tough 2 games at the start of the series, and then Anthony Edwards was flying high, and the T-Wolf crowd were celebrating early. But you know what? Now they're going to have to see if they can back that up. And similar to what Indiana's got to go through tomorrow night, I think this is a pivotal game for OKC. Because even if they lose the game, people are going to say, all right, well, they're just going to go home, and probably it's going to be a home court series the rest of the way. So we think. But for the Thunder, just like we saw there in Denver, when they were down 2-1 and they won that game, and it showed their growth. And then we were thinking that maybe by them being up 3-2 going to Denver, and if they would have closed out that game, I'm not going to go as far as saying that that would have been a statement game, but it would have sent a message to think that, they are not playing knowing that they wanted to close out the series when they absolutely had to, and they did not do so, as you know, because they did win in 7. So to me, this is going to be an interesting game for them tonight, because obviously with all the momentum, and I'm sure the crowd, and at the end of this holiday weekend, everybody's going to try to flock there to the Target Center to see if the T-Wolves could get the equalizer and go back to OKC tied at 2. But now let's see them stem that tide. Let's see SGA, Jalen Williams, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, the whole gang, Chet Holmgren, come up with a gut check. And I understand it's not really a gut check from a standpoint because they're up 2-1, but still, this could be a home court series, as I mentioned, but I want to see some mettle. I want to see some toughness. I want to see even some attitude to think that, yes, we did win 68 games this year. Yes, we can win big games where maybe the chips are down, as you saw there in the previous series, winning that pivotal Game 4 in Denver. And again, I understand they're not trailing in the series, but to me, if they lose a close game tonight, so let's say they lose a 118-115 game, all right, a loss is a loss, there's no moral victories, but at least you could think to yourself that, all right, well, at least we're in the game. They get blown out by 18, 20, 25 points, you're going to think, which team's going to show up? And you would think that come Game 5 on Wednesday night, which we'll talk about on Thursday, watch the series be tied at 2, and then OKC is going to run Minnesota out of the gym the way they did in the first 2 games. So then you're going to think, all right, well, they have the home court. They're a team that's just going to win their home games from here on out, and if they do so, they're going to win an NBA championship. Which, okay, fine, if that's the case, but part of the makings of a good team is winning that tough game on the road. And after getting their doors blown off, losing by 42 there in Game 3, you could only think that they're going to have a better effort and better performance there tonight. Is it going to translate to a victory? Obviously, we'll have to watch and see. But that's what I mean about this team. Are they just going to kind of go through the motions, maybe have a stretch where they take a lead in the first half, and then Minnesota in a little nip and tuck, and then next thing you know, late third quarter, they go on a run, and then OKC saying, all right, well, we still have home court. We're just going to go home and we'll lick our wounds and pick up Game 5 on Wednesday night. That's what I want to see, the toughness. I want to see the mettle of that team at least be in there within the last 2 minutes, or maybe even pulling away late to show like, this is a team that won 68 games and means business, not a team that did win 68 games and are kind of resting on their laurels and just thinking that they could just go out there as a young team with their talent that, we could just tip up the ball and they're going to concede and we're going to win the game. And that's what I want to see, especially with a young coach and obviously with young players led by their MVP. To me, that's imperative as a sports fan to see how they react from that performance there on Saturday night and how they perform tonight, how that translates. And that's why it's intriguing. Granted that the game is in Minnesota, and a lot of people will think that the T-Wolves will win to even the series, but this is where I want to see OKC put their foot down and say, it's not happening here. We want to go back home up 3-1 and close it out, and then that's it. We'll see you in the finals. So we got those 2 games and 2 series to look forward to. I hope that it does get evened up tonight. I think the T-Wolves, I think they will. This is already looking like it's a home court series because you have not had one competitive game whatsoever. Watch tonight be that one. But I could see Minnesota pulling away late, Anthony Edwards, the home crowd, etc. And then by the time we get together on Thursday, we may see another rout in OKC where the Thunder will win, then it's 3-2 going back to Minnesota, and we'll pick it up at that point. But could I see a chance where it's late in the game and OKC is either tied or up by a basket? Absolutely. Do I have 100% confident feeling or nature in that? I can't say I do. And that's not just based on the team. That's just based on what the trend has been throughout the first 3 games. And of course, it could change on a dime, we understand. But how many postseasons have we seen in the NBA where the home teams dominate to the point where they get back in the series, and then next thing you know, all right, well, now it's 2-2. Well, if the T-Wolves are going to be serious, let's say if they do win tonight, and obviously we're not going to be in front of this camera, or I'm not going to be in front of this camera and microphone until then. Well, if Minnesota's going to win tonight, whether they win by 1 or by 50, let me see them have a lead, whether it be at the half, and not a 48-44 lead as you saw in Game 1. Let me see them be up by close to double digits, an 8 to 12 point lead, and let it stick. Because I'm not going to take the T-Wolves seriously, even if they win by 100 tonight, because everybody's going to then jump on their bandwagon and think, whoa, now all the momentum's on their side, where watch them go to OKC and they're going to lay another big giant deuce on center court. So as much as we could talk about OKC, how this is a big game for them, well, I want to see Minnesota, if they do win tonight, put up what they've done in these past 2 games to have that translate to Game 5 to show the world that, wow, they do mean business. And not only that, but they've learned from past mistakes, whether it be in the conference finals last year against Dallas or even against Denver, if you recall, when Denver, they were down 0-2 in the series, then they won the next 3 games before losing a Game 6 in their building and then winning a Game 7 in Denver, as you know, when they're down by 20. So maybe that could somehow be compartmentalized here into this series to have them go into a Game 5 if they are tied at 2, knowing that they could go back in the memory bank and say, we've been on this road before, so we know what it takes to win this type of game. That's what I want to see when it comes to the T-Wolves. So I'll have my fingers on the pulse when it comes to that. Now, one other note I want to say, and this is actually the WNBA, because that's it for the NBA as far as nothing off the court that's happening. I know they had their first team and second team All-NBA teams. The nods were released the other day. I won't touch on that. There really isn't anything to discuss. You know who those guys are. SGA, Jason Tatum, are just a couple of the guys that are there, Nikola Jokic, etc. So really, to go down that and to even dispute or argue that, I'll save that for some other time. But yes, with the WNBA, you have a scenario where Caitlin Clark is going to be out 2 weeks with a quad strain. And the reason why I bring that up is because we know what in this first week of the WNBA season, and obviously with a lot of the fireworks early on with Angel Reese, and the Fever looking like they could be a big team this year, and for her to be out a couple of weeks. Now, granted, it's 2 weeks. People are going to say, it's early on in the season, no big whoop. But it is something that maybe we'll have to keep on our radar because a quad strain, who knows if that's going to be re-aggravated or if that's going to crop up some point later on in their season. So just something to keep in mind here, and I just thought it would be newsworthy to bring up before I transition over to the ice So for Caitlin Clark and the Fever, if she's coming to town and you have tickets over the next 2 weeks, you're not going to see her because of this quad strain. Who knows how severe? If it's just a couple of weeks, I'm sure she'll probably be okay after that. But again, you never know when this thing can pop up or be re-aggravated. So one more time, something just to keep in the back of your mental Rolodex as their season moves along. All right, now let me get to the ice as I lace up my skates with the NHL. And this is probably going to be quick, people, because for tonight, in a Game 4 down in South Florida in Sunrise, the Florida Panthers are looking to go back to not only be in defense of their Stanley Cup championship last year, but they're looking for their third straight Stanley Cup Final appearance. We all know 2 years ago against Vegas, obviously last year winning against Edmonton, and it looks like the Oilers are going to possibly, now they still got work to do as they're up 2-1, and I'll get to them in a minute, but this is looking like a formality here. Unless there's a big shift or something changes here over the course of these next couple of games. But with the game tonight in South Florida, where the Panthers are going to have 3 of their players, no AJ Greer, no Nico Mikkola, and Sam Reinhart, who got hurt there early in the series by Sebastian Aho. And if you saw there on Saturday night where Matt Tkachuk went at it with him, and therefore, just to try to stick up for his teammate is Reinhart. Who knows how long he's going to be out of the lineup. But still, the Panthers have just eviscerated the Hurricanes here, beating them 6-2 there the other night. And obviously on the heels of a 5-0 shutout there in Game 2 on Thursday night. So the Hurricanes have 0 answers. And I'll say this, not to say you have to have superstar players littered throughout your lineup. And we get how good of a team the Hurricanes are. You're not that good if you, or I should say, you are a good team if you get this far, but you're not that good to get to the next level. And for whatever the reason, whether it's just the Panthers being a mirror image of the Hurricanes and the style of play, but they have better players and better goal scorers, and obviously they have that championship DNA. So therefore, the Hurricanes cannot match anything that what the Panthers have done here. But I would think this is going to be a sweep tonight, despite that they're going to have 3 players out. Now, do the Hurricanes show any pride here tonight? I would only hope so, considering that they've just been, like I said, bludgeoned in these 3 games. What have they lost? 5-0, 5-2, 6-2. And these games haven't even been close. So why would I think that tonight's game would be close? And Frederick Anderson, who I believe was pulled there the other night, they put in the backup, and he was no good. So I guess they're going to bring back Anderson for tonight's game because this is it for them. They're already at the tip of the plank, and they're literally one step from falling off of it into the ocean, and that hurricane is going to be left as just a whimper, as a breeze. So do the Panthers, do I think they're going to do it tonight? I would think so. They'd want to sweep them, and to think this streak has to get snapped at some point where the Hurricanes have lost, I believe, 15 straight conference final games dating back to 2009. So at some point this has to end, but for whatever reason, the Panthers have their number. So I'm going to think they're going to close it out tonight, which I know will be a bad thing for the NHL because they want to have length in these series, similar to Adam Silver wanting to have length in the conference finals because the NBA finals do not begin until a week from this coming Thursday, which is 10 days from now. And if you recall last year, Celtics Mavericks, they concluded their series in 4 and 5 games where you had an 8-day layoff between the conference finals and the NBA finals. So right now, it's certainly looking that that's going to be the case there in the NHL, especially with the Panthers and Hurricanes. And then on the flip side, in the Western Conference, although Edmonton, they blew that game 1 in just a brutal fashion where they gave up all those power play goals in the third period. Well, they bounced back with a 3-0 shutout there in game 2 down in Dallas. And then last night, another explosion there offensively where Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman both had a couple of goals. Stuart Skinner, the goaltender, who now had to pick up from where Calvin Pickard left off in the previous round. And for Skinner, who has been phenomenal in his return, considering shutout and then 1 goal here, there last night. And now the Oilers have a game 4 in their building, which they could certainly try to get in their back pocket to go to Dallas and maybe close out the Dallas Stars. But the Stars have always responded here, considering when you look at their track record, and I would not be surprised if they even up the series there tomorrow night in Edmonton and at least push this series to 6 games. Now, I did pick the Stars to win in 6, maybe 7. Yeah, I did say 7. And again, that's based on me thinking that the Stars are going to get to a Cup Final. So integrity and to make sure that I would hold myself accountable to keeping that pick although the Rangers were the Eastern Conference representative, and we all know that they're nowhere to be found here. But I stuck with these Stars, although in my heart I'm rooting for Edmonton to get to a Cup final because I would like to see Connor McDavid win that coveted and elusive Stanley Cup ring, considering last year they came all the way behind from a 3-0 series deficit to the Panthers and then got to a Game 7 and lost. So I'd love to see a rematch, and I think that's what Gary Bettman and company would like, because you certainly don't want to have Carolina. You don't have to worry about Carolina being there, because I'd be shocked if they come all the way back. Maybe even winning one game would be a shock, but I don't see them even extending this to as far as 6 games. But for the Western Conference, I would think they want to see Edmonton there. Dallas, as we all know, an excellent team, very good goaltending, coached by Peter DeBoer. But everybody, I would think, even the casual fan, wants to see the sport's best player in a one, Connor McDavid, to go along with Leon Draisaitl and all their firepower there, to see if they can get another shot at the defending Cup champs, and which would be the first time that we haven't had since the 08-09 seasons, to where Pittsburgh played Detroit in those back-to-back finals, where Detroit won in 08 and then Pittsburgh in 09. So if you do see Edmonton and Florida meet in a Cup final, it'll be the first time you'll have back-to-back Cup finalists since that time, and that's going back, what, so 16, 17 years. So you have that to look forward to. And let me look right now to see who would get the home ice in the next round if it is Edmonton, Florida. Actually, Edmonton will have the home ice. Wow. Edmonton had 101 points in the regular season, where Florida had 98. So think about that. You'll have a role reversal here, because if you recall, last year the Panthers had the home ice. So this year it would be the opposite. Now, it wouldn't matter, because if Dallas were to win, they had more points than Edmonton. So if the Stars do win the Western Conference, the Panthers will still have to be the road team, which they were 2 years ago when they lost to Vegas in, I believe it was 5 games. And then if, for whatever reason, the Panthers fall flat on their face and lose this series, Carolina, they actually have 99 points, so they would also be the road team in Dallas and in Edmonton. I just thought to throw that out there, because obviously that series isn't over, although in my heart I feel it is over. But I just thought to throw that out there as well as we round out this Stanley Cup playoff and hockey segment. But for Dallas, I think they could extend that. I think they could win tomorrow night. I would not be shocked if Edmonton, I'd be shocked if you see another 6-1, 5-1 type game, because you then have to wonder what is going on there with the Stars. But I think that game and that series could actually go 6, where I'd be shocked if it goes past 5. So even if Carolina does show some guts and some pride tonight, that the series is not going to go past 5 games, because I think the Panthers will try to put them away quick, fast, in a hurry after that, because the last thing they want to do is extend it now to go back to Florida, down 3-2. All the momentum now in the Carolina gas tank, and then they don't have to worry. And all they have to do is just think about this. All they have to do is just think back to the Cup final last year, where they let Edmonton come all the way back from 3-0, and I'm sure maybe that's going to be part of the chatter in the locker room to say, boys, let's just wrap this sucker up tonight, even with 3 of our guys out of the lineup. So I'll keep an eye on that. And yes, as I see here, the Hurricanes will go back to Frederik Andersen, obviously, because this is do or die for them. Couple of quick hockey notes that I want to bring up. Number one, the Islanders have hired former Tampa Bay executive to be the GM of the team, and that being Matthew Darche. So does that mean Patrick Roy stays as coach? Will they have a little bit of a meeting of the minds, or will there be a different philosophy mindset moving forward? Bringing a guy from the Lightning hierarchy, I think a very good step, considering what they've done here, more so in the early part of the decade, but overall, we know that team has been a consistent model of success. So let's see. We don't know if he's going to be Bill Torrey just yet, so you got to give the young guy a shot. And now they're going to have to wonder whether or not they're going to keep Roy as coach, or what type of players he's going to bring in. Also, what is the budget for them to bring players? I can't tell you off the top of my head how many free agents. As we get closer to the end of next month, when free agency opens up in July, we'll certainly massage that to see where we're going to go as far as the Islanders and throughout the whole league, but more so the Islanders, not only being my favorite team, but more so they have the number 1 pick in the draft. So there's going to be an interesting time there as the Islanders now try to get out of this malaise over the last couple of years. Remember, at the start of this decade, they went to back-to-back conference finals where they played the Lightning and lost both of those series. Obviously, the Lightning went on to win cups. And since then, they've been one and done, mostly by Carolina along the way. And then they haven't made the playoffs here, especially when Barry Trotz was jettisoned, or maybe they had a mutual parting of the ways. And since then, the Lane Lamberts and the Patrick Roys haven't really cut it. So let's see if the Islanders could turn their fortunes around here with the hire of their new GM. And speaking of which, is the shakeup, or has the shakeup begun in Toronto, considering that Brendan Shanahan, the Leaf president, over the last, I believe it was 11 years, gone, considering they were ousted in the second round after being up 2-0 to the Panthers, as you know. So with Shanahan gone, who's going to be the new guy, the new sheriff? Who knows? Craig Berube, I think he'd be fine considering the 1 year. He did get him past the first round. And for a Leaf team, which I thought they had to break up this team, whether that means not signing John Tavares and Mitch Marner, who's also a free agent, do they roll the dice and bring him back? I wouldn't, and I understand he's a key part of that team, but they have not been able to show up in big spots. They've just shrunk and have not been big-time players. I think Austin Matthews you keep unless you get the ultimate sweetheart deal of a lifetime. Here you would stay, and also Nylander, but as far as Marner and Tavares, I think gone, and same with Nylander. To me, I wouldn't keep him as a lock or a guy that is untradeable. Matthews, I certainly would not put him on the block, but everybody else should be fair game. So that's why I looked at with the Maple Leafs, as you well know if you've listened to me over the last couple of weeks. So I just thought to throw that out there when it comes to the hockey. All right, now let me get in the batter's box, talk a little baseball, as now Memorial Day is here, or whenever you're listening to this, but it is officially the unofficial beginning of summer, as I mentioned, and before you know it, blink of an eye, it'll be 4th of July, it'll be the All-Star break, it'll be August, and then it'll be Labor Day. But of course, that's how these summers go here, especially in the Northeast, where we try to savor it, where we try to enjoy it. And although the warm weather hasn't come, as you heard me say from the very start, but nevertheless, we are already at this first juncture. And before I even get to the ultimate landscape, we had a big series there in baseball over the weekend, where the Mets and Dodgers faced off for the first time since the NLCS of last year. And they will square off again a week from today, 4 games at Chavez Ravine. So it's not as if there's going to be a big layoff between the next time that these two teams meet. You only have to wait another week before doing so. And you can only hope that the Mets can now fatten up on their schedule, considering they have the White Sox coming in for 3, and then follow that, the Rockies. So you have 2 of the worst teams in the sport are going to invade Citi Field. So the Mets, you can only hope that they could tack on to this very modest 2-game winning streak, and maybe by the time we get to this time next week, we'll have an 8-game winning streak, or at least win 5 of 6, because anything less than that would be flat out embarrassing. You would take 2 out of 3 against the White Sox and Rockies, but come on. That's why these teams are the dregs of the sport. So you hope to pound on them here over the course of this next week. But going back to Mets-Dodgers, that was a very good rebound from what happened there Friday night, where they were down 5-2, and you had weird plays throughout. The tag-up play with Conforto on second, where it was bobbled in the outfield, and the Dodgers, who the Mets had many opportunities to win the game, despite the fact that they were down by 3 in the 9th inning, and they rallied against Tanner Scott, the closer, tied the game, and like I mentioned, had opportunities in extra innings, bases loaded, and you name it, but they were unable to cash in until the Dodgers prevailed there on Friday night. And then, like I mentioned on Thursday's podcast with Juan Soto, he delivered with a big-time double there, almost a home run that hit off the top of the wall, in securing a Met win there on Saturday night. And then last night, after Shohei Ohtani goes deep, and more on Ohtani in a second, Ohtani goes deep on the game's second pitch to lead off the game. And then in the bottom of the first, Pete Alonso hits a laser beam of a home run, 2-1. They tack on another run with Kodai Senga in their bullpen, and the Mets win their first matchup against the Dodgers this year, winning 2 out of 3. Could have swept, but you know what? You'll take 2 out of 3 as they get their first series win in the last 10 days. They hadn't won since their last homestand against the Pirates, where they did win 2 out of 3, but remember, they lost the last game of that series. They lost 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium, and then 2 out of 3 in Fenway, on top of losing the first game in the series against the Dodgers. So they were able to get themselves back on the beam, and with the White Sox and Rockies coming in, it is the panacea for a long winning streak, and maybe to propel them back into first place in the NL East, which they're still trailing, and more on that in a moment. But as far as Ohtani goes, he pitched off of the Citi Field mound, throwing live BP, only 22 pitches, nothing really to write home about, but you have to wonder if this is going to be the start of his recovery to maybe get on the mound to pitch in a regular season game, whether that be next month, maybe sometime early July, maybe after the All-Star break, who knows? No timetable has been put forth by the manager, Dave Roberts, or anybody in the Dodger organization. So Ohtani could be coming to a mound near you, whether it's at Cervez Ravine or on the road somewhere. So that's something just to keep in mind, considering that he is now starting to build up that right arm, coming off a Tommy John surgery, and maybe, just maybe, be that effective starting pitcher that we've seen during his days in Anaheim as an Angel, and now with the Dodgers. We'll see if that's going to happen maybe sooner, if not later. But as far as the landscape goes in baseball, as of right this very moment, we could go through the divisions, which I will, but what we've seen here so far, there have been some surprises, as we expect, and some disappointments, as we know. One of those disappointments being the Braves, but now that they have Ronald Acuna Jr. back in the mix, who in his first pitch, coming off of the IL with that torn ACL that he suffered last year, hit a home run, but for what that was worth, the Braves did not have a big series against the Padres. They lost 2 out of 3. As the Braves, who have gotten back to 500, but for them it's been 0-7 out of the gate, as you know, but they've taken like 5 steps forward and then 8 steps back, and then as they've gotten closer to 500, they've gotten 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. And like I mentioned, over the weekend, where the Padres beat them 2 out of 3, and the games were close in the losses that they had against the Padres, but they were able to get a 7-1 win sandwiched in between throughout the course of the weekend. They did win 6-3 last night, so it's not as if the game was that close. But for the Braves, you have to wonder whether or not they have a second half push in front of them. Remember, 3 years ago when the Mets were in first place by 10.5 games, and I believe around this time, they had a similar record. I think they were 23-27 in the NL East, but as of right this very moment, I think they're 25-27 if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that is correct, but do they have a big push ahead of them to where they could get themselves toward the top of the division, where obviously the Phillies are in first place and then the Mets right behind them, 2 in the loss and 2 games back exactly with the Phils. But the lay of the land is this. Are the Tigers the best team in the American League? Their record indicates so, but are they a team that certainly has the chops to have a long playoff run and maybe get to a World Series for the first time since 2012? That's one question that a lot of people are going to look forward to throughout the course of this summer. Is there going to be another team? Will it be Seattle or the Astros? Do they have anything left in their tank, considering all the players that have left there over the last few years? If they have a little bit of magic left in their dugout? What about the AL Central, whether it's the Guardians, the Twins, who've had a tremendous run here, as you know, throughout the course of May, even the Royals for that matter? What are they going to do here as they try to maybe even bolster their rotations or lineup as you get deeper into June and certainly into July, when we look forward to the trade deadline at the end of that month? So the American League, as we talked about during the MLB preview, it is wide open. Even the Yankees, as they have a 6-game lead, the biggest lead in any division throughout the sport. But considering that the Rays, who have played well here, and the Rays right now are 6 behind the Yankees, where the Red Sox have sputtered here, the Blue Jays can't get out of their own way, and the Orioles, to me, they're already out to sea, which is a shame, and it's an embarrassment when you think about it, considering what they've done here the last 2 years, and they weren't able to get anybody into their rotation, or their lineup was fine. They have a lot of young players, but to bring back some starting pitching, which would have done leaps and bounds, a world of difference to that franchise. But as it is, they're going to be out to sea this year, and who knows what their front office is going to do when they get past this year. But that's obviously for the end of the year, unless they have a big run in them, which I don't see happening. But the American League, as you know, wide open. And in the National League, the Cardinals have been a big-time surprise. They had gotten off to a good start, but then they hit a big-time lull, and then they had that big winning streak in the middle, similar to what we saw with the Twins. And now that they're just 2 games behind the Cubs in the division, so they look like they could be a divisional threat. We know about the NL West. That is stacked with the Dodgers, Giants, Padres, and even with the D-backs, although 5 back of the Dodgers as of right this moment, but we know that they're very good, and they've actually hit the skids here as of late. They got swept by the aforementioned Cardinals and lost to 2 games in LA that now are mired in this 5-game losing streak. But you can't discount them considering what they've done here recent stretch. Last year, they were literally just a hair from making the postseason. They had the Mets, if you remember, that final day where they had the doubleheader, the day after the regular season, where they had the makeup game from the rainout, and with the Mets winning the first game in dramatic fashion, and then they sat everybody, and then the Braves won their game. So with those two teams winning, that ousted the Diamondbacks from the postseason, and obviously the year before, they went to a World Series. So how I'm looking at this overall is American League. I think the Tigers are legit, but are they World Series legit? Guardians, Twins, Royals. Can you give me more than what we saw last year? Especially with the Guardians and Royals. Royals, they did get out of the first round, the wild card round, beating the Orioles, and then they lost to the Yankees there. And then, of course, the Guardians went to an ALCS. So do they have that in them to get to in October and maybe back to those similar spots and beyond? The AL East, I'm not even going to look at. I won't look at the wild card standings until we get to July 4th, because to start looking at the wild card standings is just a joke right now. It's way too early. Can we get past the halfway point of the year? And a lot of teams have played anywhere between 52, 53 games. So we still have another month plus to go in order for us to get to that juncture. But AL East, Central, obviously very competitive. And in the West, there's a toss-up. I know the Rangers have not played well here and certainly have underachieved. I know they don't have Corey Seager in the lineup, which obviously is not good. He is an emotional leader for that team, obviously going ahead and winning a World Series the way they did a couple of years ago. And to have him in the lineup certainly is a boon, but also to have him in that dugout with all of his experience, winning 2 titles, etc., is certainly missed in that locker room, etc. And then the Angels, who have played well here, although they lost the last couple of games to the Marlins of all teams. But remember, they swept the Dodgers. They swept the Athletics 4 games up in Sacramento. And even though the Athletics, they've hit the skids here a little bit, although they did the Mets a favor by beating the Phillies there yesterday out in Sacramento. But for the Rangers, are they going to get themselves in decent shape to try to get themselves back in the mix for the West, where Seattle, I think they still need more offense. We know about their pitching staff. And George Kirby, I believe, has made a return to their rotation. So that's going to be another added arm in that rotation. And in the Astros, I don't really trust or believe in, and they can't win at home for whatever the reason. Although they have a good home record this year, but in their playoffs, I think they've lost, if I date back to last year or 2 years ago, they lost the 4 games in the ALCS to the Rangers. They lost the 2 games at home to the Tigers. I believe they lost the last game in the previous round. But I think they've lost minimum 6, maybe 7 in a row at home in the postseason. But because they are a far cry from what they once were, I'm not going to take them as a serious contender in my eyes. But that's what you have in the American League. And we know the National League is top heavy. Dodgers, Padres, Phillies, Mets. You want to say Cubs? Are they in that mix with those teams? I think they're a couple low. Same for the Cardinals. The Brewers, who right now are scuffling at 2 games under 500. So do you have to give them respect considering what they've done here over the last few years? Maybe, but that is a weak division, as you know. But who knows at the end of the day, because it is weak. And even though they're 5 back of the Cubs in the loss column, but 6.5 overall. Listen, the Cardinals came from the dead. They were, I believe, if I looked at where their low water mark was this year, let me see if I can pull up their schedule real quick. They were 12-17. They were 12-17 at one point. And I don't know if that was their low water mark as of late. Yeah, they swept the Tigers to start the year. We know that. 12-17. 14-19, so that's still 5 under. Yeah, they were 14-19. Actually, when they had the Mets come to town earlier this month, and from that point on, remember, they beat the Mets those 2 games in a doubleheader after a washout, and then they swept the Pirates, Nationals, and then the Phillies. They didn't sweep them. They won that 1 game, so they won 9 in a row to get themselves a 23-19 from 14-19, and since then, listen, they played pretty well. So, and they beat the Royals 2 out of 3. They beat the Phillies 2 out of 3. So, just like the Cardinals have come back and have put themselves in the mix for the division, the Brewers could do the same. So, I guess I can't throw the Brewers out completely. And we know what's happening in the NL West. So, it's going to be a toss-up. We know the teams that are bad that are not going to be a part of this mix. I know the Reds have been a disappointment. Let me talk about them real quick. the Reds with Terry Francona, and they actually had a decent start, and things were looking pretty good for them when you got to the early, middle part of the month, but they have not played well. And the Reds right now are what? Yeah, in the same boat as the Brewers, 26 and 28. But again, that division, I won't go as far as saying it's wide open, but it's certainly not a division where any of those teams are going to run away. We would think the Cubs, when it's all said and done, will do so. But listen, the Cardinals did it. Why not the Brewers or the Reds? But when you have the teams like the Pirates, the Rockies, who, as we all know, are god-awful, and they've had the worst start since 1900. The worst 50-game start in the history of the sport, 8-42. You got to go back to 1895. I don't know if it was the Cleveland Spiders or one of those teams. It may have been the Spiders. I think they were 7-36. No, I take that back. 7-43. My math is all screwed up right now. So obviously they had the worst start, and that's dating back into the 19th century. So that just goes to show you how historic that this start is for the Rockies in the wrong direction. But we know that. And who knows, now that the A's have fallen apart here, who knows if they're going to be able to rebound. And the one thing about the Athletics, they've been awful at home. I don't know if it's because they haven't really been adjusted to the Sacramento life, going from Oakland to Sacramento. But their road record, they're 2 games above 500, but at home they're 10 under, which is inexplicable when you think about it. But who knows if the the Athletics are going to have a run here where they're going to get themselves maybe in the wild card, if not a division. I mean, they are 7 behind and 8 in a loss, but are you scared of the Mariners in the AL West if you're an Athletic player, fan, organization, etc.? So just something to keep in mind there. But for the remainder of the sport, the bad teams, when you talk about Marlins, when you're talking about White Sox, when you're talking about Rockies, when you're talking about Pirates, when you're talking about Orioles, I don't think they're going to have a run in them. Angels, I think they'll fall apart at some point. But they're 4 back right now, so I guess I can't throw them in the trash just yet. So you have a lot of teams that are still in the mix, and if you're baseball, that's what you want. Now, we would think by the time we get to the 4th of July, the next point that we'll take a look at the land of Major League Baseball, we'll see where they're at and where the chips have fallen at that point. But the good thing is that a lot of the teams that you've talked about, maybe the Nationals too, as I see them, maybe for a wild card, but way too early to even look at that. They're 5 under at the moment. And the Braves, as I mentioned at the very top. So we will certainly keep a close eye and monitor what's going to happen here as we now start the unofficial beginning of summer. June will begin this coming Sunday. And then once we get into the teeth of the baseball schedule, which will be into next month when the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals will conclude, and baseball will be all by their lonesome as far as the 4 major sports that will lead us from late June through the summer and then obviously into the pennant races there, August and September. So we have that to look forward to. And then one other thing I want to talk about, which I didn't mention with the Red Sox, I know they've been floundering. Alex Bregman now on the shelf. Who knows for how long? He has this injury that seemed to have a similar injury that he suffered in 2021 where they brought up Marcelo Meyer, one of their big-time prospects. So Bregman out of the lineup is not a huge blow. It is an enormous blow to a Red Sox team that is trying to find their way, not only just in the AL East, but also in the American League as a team that, obviously they have the talent. They have a very good rotation, as you know, and a lineup that, losing Tristan Costas, but they still have guys whether Trevor Story, who's been healthy, and if Bregman's healthy, Devers, Duran Duran. They do have a pretty decent lineup, but having Bregman out for any significant amount of time is going to be a huge blow, so that's certainly one that we'll have to pay attention to. All right, now let me shift my attention to a couple of quick things here. First off, I want to talk about the college football, and this will be quick as I put on my helmet and shoulder pads. Nothing in the NFL. I'm not going to talk about Fred Warner, the top linebacker that's paid in the sport. That happened actually middle of last week, which I didn't touch on, but I'll throw that in the mix. But college football got it right, and they took care of it right away with maybe not right away, as we're already into the latter part of May, but for the playoff next year, it's going to go by seeding. And that is a hallelujah, if you ask me, because you don't have to worry about teams that win their conference, whether it's Boise State or Arizona State, who lost after having the bye, lost in that second round, so to speak, of the college football playoff. Now, that teams that win their conference championship, they will have a home game, but they will not have the seeding. So that is a situation where whomever's going to be, whether it's the AP or the coaches poll, I don't know which one it is just yet, but whomever's ranked in the top 4 will have automatic buys, and then 5 on down will, of course, be broken up by conference champions. And even though Notre Dame, obviously, if they're going to be ranked 5th, they're going to have the 5 through 12 matchup. So that's kudos to them. They don't have to worry about having to be in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12 for that matter, that is going to come across winning the conference championship. What is it, Big 12 or, I said Pac-12, but we know Pac-12 is all fuzzy right now. So with college football getting that right, and they had to do that because you couldn't have teams that, let's say, had 2 losses or were ranked anywhere between 8 and 12 have buys over the likes of Ohio State or even Penn State for that. Well, Penn State, I believe, were in the top 4, weren't they? Teams like that where, there was no way. As a matter of fact, let me see if I pull that up here real quick. Yeah, last year was Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State. So Penn State did have their bye, but you had other teams that were a cup below that, Ohio State in particular, to where they were not a team that was ranked 5th. And I believe Ohio State was ranked 5th, where they obviously had to go the hard road and the right road for them because it ended up with them winning a national championship. So kudos to college football. They got that right. They had to go by the rankings. That was the best way to do it. No way to try to get cute with, because you won a conference championship, you're going to get the buys as far as the top 4 seeds. Nonsense. They'll get a home game, but they won't get a bye, so they got it right. So good for them. So I just wanted to touch on that. Then real quick, and this is a blip here, for those who were into the Indy 500, and I touched on it a little bit, and if you listen to my podcast over the years, I have some sentiment when it comes to the Indy 500, only because it pretty much ushered in summer as a boy with the Sports Illustrated and the guy who won the Indy 500 on the cover, which I always look forward to when I was an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old, maybe even earlier than that. I would say 877 when I started getting SI. But Alex Palou is your Indy 500 winner. He had won 4 or 5 races coming into the Indy 500, so he came in hot as a pistol, and he's the first Spanish driver to win the Indy 500, so congratulations to him. Did I watch a lick? Absolutely not. I was at a barbecue, a family deal yesterday, so although I kept my eyes on it on my phone, but it wasn't as if I'm watching lap by lap being riveted as to who's going to win this race, but because it's a big event, ushering in summer, I just thought to throw that out there, and he actually was in attendance last night, which I believe, funny enough, the Indianapolis 500 in conjunction with the conference finals has happened 4 times in the history of Pacers and Indy 500, and now the Pacers have an 0-4 record. So I would think that that's an omen for future conference finals if the Pacers get that far, that if the Indianapolis 500 happens to fall while they're playing, hopefully they're on the road than they are at home, because for whatever reason, the Pacers do not seem to secure a victory when the Indy 500 is on the same day as a Game 3, or maybe in the past a Game 4 as it was. But there you go for that record. And Palou, I think his name is, Palou was in attendance there last night with the, with the belt in front of him, but whatever award, trophy, etc., and I should know that. But he was in attendance, came in there, I believe, mid-second quarter, maybe to even try to increase the level of fandom or just the racing fan that was in the building, because of course the Indianapolis Speedway, I'm sure there are a lot of racing fans there in Indianapolis, and why not? But it certainly didn't have any effect on the Pacer fans, although they had a big first half, and we talked about it earlier, the lead second half up by 16, 10 in the fourth, and yeah, that was all for naught. As we know, that's a series there between Knicks and Pacers. And then lastly, and I should have saved this for last, but you know what? I'll unpack a little bit of this. The French Open kicked off yesterday, but I didn't have a preview. And I figured after day one, it's not as if you're going to have the Carlos Alcarazes or the Arena Sabalenkas or Coco Gauffs be eliminated by the time I started recording this, but you do have 2 big upsets. Emma Navarro, who I believe is ranked 9th in the world, was ousted straight sets and only won 1 game in the process. He lost 6-love, 6-1. And that was just a shocker by Spaniard Jessica Balsas-Banero. And listen, Navarro, who's had her runs, I believe she made it to, what was it, a quarterfinal? Was it last year at the French, if I'm not mistaken? Now, I should know this. Obviously, just brushing up and seeing that she was ousted here pretty much before the first day was actually over. But for Navarro, that was a bit of a shock. But an even more bigger shock was Taylor Fritz, the fourth-ranked player in the men's player in the world, out, gone, kaput by a German Daniel Altmaier. So Taylor Fritz, who has had his runs here over the course of these major tournaments, but he is out. Maybe he had too many baguettes or wine the night before, who knows? But Fritz, an American, done, toast, and gone. And you won't have to worry about him because that side of the draw would have had Fritz to go up against Jannik Sinner, who was the top draw on the men's side. And then you have Carlos Alcaraz, who won his match, as well as Alexander Zverev, the 2 and 3. Who knows, they could possibly meet up in a semifinal. Now Fritz, with him gone, no shot for him to possibly meet Sinner in the semifinal. So when you look at those sides of the draw, now Djokovic is 6th. I believe he's on the side and the draw of Sinner. As I was looking at the bracket, I was really confused when trying to break it down. And remember, there's a zillion players here. It's not as if you have the brackets similar to the NCAA tournament where you have 16 players here, 16 players there, etc., where you could really get a focus and key on which players are going to possibly face against one another as you get deeper into the tournament. But for whatever the reason, we'll have to see Djokovic, I believe, on that side. But as we get deeper into the week, and obviously we'll see what transpires here over the course of these next couple of days when we revisit on Thursday. But it's Sinner, who, as we talked about on Thursday, had that 3-month suspension because of the doping scandal. And it should have been more, as we know. But all right, he's there now. And I'm sure a lot of people want to see a Sinner-Alcaraz meetup or matchup in the final, where Alcaraz, who won the French last year, is the defending champ. And I'm sure all the tennis fans will want to see that and the build-up leading up until that final, which would be 2 weeks from yesterday. So something to keep an eye on there. And on the women's side, where you have a scenario with Aryna Sabalenka, the #1 player in the world, followed by Coco Gauff. Then you have Jessica Pegula, who's 3rd. And you have Iga Świątek, who has won this tournament 3 straight years and 4 the last 5 years. But Świątek has not played well since the French last year. And you have to wonder whether or not, listen, this is her surface. She loves playing on the red clay there at Roland Garros. But is she going to have some length here? Is she going to be one that we'll see going into next week and defending her 3-time championship? Who knows? Now, Świątek, you would think, friendly confines, she's going to play well. I don't know if she has any nagging injuries or she's nursing an injury or two along the way, but this is one that on the women's side, which again, a lot of people may not follow, or it's a niche sport. Well, who follows tennis, or especially women's tennis? You know I'm into it. So let's see if Świątek will have any legs in this tournament to see if she could get herself deep into next week and maybe be a 5-time champion in 4 straight. It may be unlikely now because Sabalenka is at the top of her game. Coco Gauff, who has not played well here in some of these smaller tournaments. So Gauff needs to get back on the beam, who has not played well. And now she's made deep runs and has gotten to semis and finals, but she has not been able to secure a championship since the U.S. Open, I believe it was in 2023. So we'll see what Coco Gauff's going to do here. We'll see what Jasmine Paolini, who's the 4th-ranked player in the world. So with Pegula and maybe Coco Gauff meeting up in a semi, where you may have Paolini, who had a very good run there last year, made it to a couple of finals before falling off and falling to eventual champs. So for Paolini and Sabalenka, maybe they'll be on a collision course. And Gauff, to me, she's a story in women's tennis. She has to get to at least a semi, and if not a final, because she's one that a lot of people are thinking that, not to say she's the next face of women's tennis, but one that a lot of people have seen and known over the years, but now she's going to have to back it up. She's going to have to show up, show out, and be a player that's going to make it into a final championship round to where she has the opportunity to add more hardware to her mantle, considering she only has the 1 major in her back pocket. So that's one that I'm going to look at there with Gauff. Pegula, who came off of winning a championship there as well, and Madison Keys. Well, I take that back. I'm thinking more Madison Keys, who won the Australian early on this year. So who knows if Keys is going to have any momentum going into this. Now, mind you, the Australian was back in late January, and here we are in late May. So it's not as if this is a situation where Rory won the Masters, and then a month later he's back at it at the PGA. Understood, but will Keys have any length? Would like to see that. So I think there's more intrigue on the women's side, if you ask me, than the men's, because the men's is so top-heavy. We know who the cast of characters are. With the women, yes, Sabalenka is by far number one in the world, but with Goff, Pegula, Keys, as well as Elena Rybakina, Petra Svitolina, there's still a lot of great tennis players that are out there that certainly could make a run, and next thing you know, will be in the semifinal or final. Where on the men's side, although they have some big names, Casper Ruud, Holger Rune, even guys like Andrei Rublev, Stefanos Tsitsipas, who I would never trust in a million years. Who knows if Francis Tiafoe has a run in him to go along with Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, etc., Zverev. But I think the women's is a little bit more intriguing. Not to say it's much more wide open, but because of Swiatek and her past there at the French Open, because of Keys and what she did down under, and Coco Gauff trying to rise back to stardom there as far as winning a tournament. So I look at the women's as a lot more intriguing, if you ask me. Who's going to win it all when it comes to 2 weeks from now? I'm going to say Alcaraz. And I think Alcaraz needs to win one again, because in Wimbledon and even the US Open did not play well. And Sinner, Alcaraz, they are 1 and 1A, if you ask me. Alcaraz is not that far behind Sinner when it comes to the rankings there, although they are ranked 1 and 2. But I'm going to say Alcaraz. And on the women's side, I don't know if Swiatek is going to be able to go 4 in a row. Sabalenka, it's hard to bet against her. And who knows? You could see Rybakina get there. I don't want to go chalk. I mean, it's easy to go chalk to say, to me, Alcaraz is chalk, although Sinner, obviously, he is a big-time opponent. But I'll say Alcaraz, and I'll say Sabalenka. What the hell? I don't know if Goff's there yet, because that's a surface clay that it's a lot different than the hard court, of course. And we know the one championship she got was on a hard court. So, and then, of course, we know Wimbledon next month will be on grass. So, I'm going to say Goff may have a deep run, but I don't think she's going to be a champion. So, I'll go Sabalenka on the women's and Alcaraz on the men's. And you know that over the course of these next 2 weeks or 13 days, my fingers will be on the pulse of that. And that'll do it, my good people. Let me just double check to see if there's anything else I'm missing. A late scenario regarding an upset there in tennis. No, that will do it. As always, people, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your Memorial Day, out of your holiday, whether you're in transit, whether in the car, on a bus. Maybe you've downloaded the podcast onto your phone and you're listening it en route, flight back home to wherever you may be. You know I am grateful. And I appreciate your support from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for following, for subscribing, all that. And if you haven't done so, please, on Apple, Spotify, write me a review, throw a few stars, do whatever it takes, take a screenshot of it, send it to me on my socials, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Of course, the YouTube channel, don't forget that, as I'm trying to get that little engine that could up to the top of the mountain, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Right now, I'm at 638, so slowly but surely getting there, but with your help. And please, as you do or do not know, I'm an independent podcaster, content creator, doing this full time, almost 16 months. So I'm trying to generate some income, trying to make a living out of this, people. Yes, I do this with a love. I do this from my heart and every fiber of my being. But you know what? Got to pay the bills. Got to keep a roof over my head. Got to have a little bit of a lifestyle here. I don't live lavish. I don't live anything extravagant. But with that being said, again, share it with the good sports fan, the great sports fan, the kook, the diehard, the casual, or someone that just likes content overall, because I do have lifestyle content coming up the pipe, or down the pipe, I should say, where you'll have a little bit of background on yours truly with what it is that I do, not only with the sports content, but also lifestyle stuff as a middle-aged man just trying to carve and blaze a trail in this podcast universe. So I got it, you covered. Whether it's sports, whether it's lifestyle, stuff that's have some meaning, some purpose, I got you covered. So please subscribe, rate, review on all the aforementioned channels. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so on my social media accounts, but as well as the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, this is what I love to do. This is my purpose. This is what I'm built to do. This is what I'm born to do. Talking sports since birth, the 10,000 hour threshold to be an outlier, I've gotten that probably times 4, times 5. That's right. And if you cannot tell, whether you're listening into your earbuds, headphones, or speakers, or watching on your phone, tablet, or TV, if the excitement, if the passion, the energy, the fury is not coming through, then you got to come back. Come back on Thursday. Come back on a live stream Wednesday, high noon, YouTube. Yes, the YouTube channel. Got to check that out. And all the other content that I mentioned, because I am not going anywhere as long as I'm alive and breathing. Again, in the blood and in the DNA, talking sports, no matter what sport it may be, all in one podcast. Where else are you going to get that? I don't know, but you're going to get it right here. With my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the Southeast, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. And oh, can I just say this real quick? Thanks. No interruptions by any of the puppies as I conclude right here. So thanks to them, and thanks to my lovely wife as well for managing over the last hour plus. So one more time, from the South Bronx, the Southeast, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.